Muturire wa Mukenya no thiite na mbere kurituha Mukenya agiteta o muthenya ni undu wa thogora wa indo gukorwo wambatirite na njira nene na gikiro gia iguru kuri ri Mukenya arakorwo agithie mahinda-ini maritu kana muturire-ini murito niguo gukorwo agikiona thani ya oro muthenya na riu muthenya wa muthi ngenda tunyitanire na aikari a kaunti ya Laikipia kuria turakorwo tukirora ati muthenya wa rucio ni riria budget ya bururi tanyitwo gukorwo igithomwo na kuri ri mahinda-ini maya Akenya mena matanya maingĩ kana uria mangienda mutongoria wa bururi akorwo akimaririkana hari budget iyo niguo muturire wao ugikorwo ugithie na mbere na njira igwete na riu tunyitanire na mwaria wa mbere uria gutwira hihi aratanya atia muthenya wa rucio. Asante sana.
Naitwa Benjare Papare, nimetoka Suguta. Mimi ndo mtaa yenye napiga hustle. Mimi ni artist na nilikuja hapa 2020 January, but so far so good. Nimekuwa nikikaa hii mtaa, nimekuwa already resident, but hustle ni ngumu sana. Hii budget yenye wanasoma kesho, naomba serikali watuangalie tafadhali na watupangie mikakati. At least tunajaribu hata sisi kumove, but venye hustle hainini haitufavor juu kama serikali imepandisha kila kitu. Of course hizi talent zenye tunatumia kwa street kupata pesa ni bure, kwa sababu hakuna mtu atakuletea kazi, na mtu akikuletea kazi hakuna kitu unapata juu. At the end of the day ni chakula tu yenye unaweza kula, unaweza afford.
Sasa pengine kesho ungetaka serikali wasaidie kwa njia gani?
Serikali washukishe kwanza bei ya chakula, sukari, unga. Hiyo at least inaweza kutusaidia juu Wakenya wengi ni maskini. Kama sasa hapa town tunakutananga na kila mtu ametoka kila side ya different sides of Kenya. Na kila mtu ana complain, hakuna mwenye anasema swati Serikali mimi naomba wasaidie especially vijana. Kuna vijana wako na matalanta hapa kwa street, lakini hizo talanta zinaharibika kwa sababu wanapeleka zote kwa drugs.
Wakuo wanana dolari huona 10. Wewe
Nĩ thengio muno mwiroreri no agikorwo kiigua ati Akenya mena matanya maingĩ hari gukorwo mutongoria wa bururi muthenya wa rucio akimaririkana na njira ya gukorwo akimaguithiria bei ya indo iria makiria marahuthira gukorwo cigithie thi niguo makorwo magiteithika. Na riu ngenda tunyitanire na mwaria wa keri uria gutwira hihi matanya make matari atia muthenya wa rucio budget ya bururi igithomwo.
Thengio nie hambere njitagwo Mwangi na ndi muikari wa guku gundu witagwo Nyahururu Laikipia, na itanya ria mbere ni ati thirikari ndigukorwo ikiongerera budget makiria tondu the more budget iragitarwo muno ri the more budget murigo wa Wanjiku kuingia tondu budget irehagwo ni Wanjiku koragwo kireha mbeca icio. So akorwo mekurehe trilioni ta 5 kana 10 ri no cito Wanjiku tugukwa nikio urona maguta ni mambatirite muno, ugakora nginyagia cukari ni wambatirite, ona urathi ukona ta ungithie kuracia nginyagia maguta tondu mao matironeka. Nona ni urathi ugakora riri tariu maguta ni turacokeria thirikari, at least ni irarekereirie maguta ni makwambia gu supply, no turenda budget yegiukari ndigakorwo iri iguru muno nigetha na ithe Wanjiku ri tutigakorwo tukiimbirwo ni murigo muno wa gutigirira ati ni twa meet budget iriku. Koguo no tukire ndira expect ni riri ni budget ona iri athometwo thutha ri ndikongererwo ona yuke iri yo kana yuke iri thi makiria nigetha tuhote tutigakinyirikire muno ta Wanjiku.
Ni thengio muno. Ngatho cia mwanya mwiroreri no agikorwo kiigua ati Akenya oho ni maragikorwo makihoya thirikari ati budget ya muthenya wa rucio ndigakorwo iri ya iguru makiria niguo Wanjiku nake ndagagituike ati ni akuhinyiririka ringi ona haria ringi agugikorwo agitwirwo magoti ma iguru ni undu wa kuringana na uria igathomwo kana oho thogora wa indo ukorwo kiambatira. Koguo ni arahoya thirikari ikorwo ikimuririkana niguo gukorwo agithii na mbere na muturire wake na njira ya raithi makiria. Na ngiribotera Sawa TV tauni-ini ya Nyahururu kaunti-ini ya Laikipia, njitagwo Wachera wa Muchemi.
Urerorera Sawa TV, Maudu ni sawa.
Muturire wa Mukenya no thiite na mbere kurituha Mukenya agiteta o muthenya ni undu wa thogora wa indo gukorwo wabatirite na njira nene na gikiro gia iguru kuria ri Mukenya arakorwo agithie mahinda-ini maritu kana muturire-ini murito niguo gukorwo agikiona thani ya oro muthenya na riu muthenya wa muthi ngende tunyitanire na aikari a kaunti ya Laikipia kuria turakorwo tukirora ati muthenya wa rucio ni riria budget ya bururi tanyitwo gukorwo igithomwo na kuria ri mahinda-ini maya Akenya mena matanya maingĩ kana uria mangienda mutongoria wa bururi akorwo akimaririkana hari budget iyo niguo muturire wao ugikorwo ugithie na mbere na njira igwete na riu tunyitanire na mwaria wa mbere uria gutwira hihi aratanya atia muthenya wa rucio. Asante sana.
Naitwa Benjare Papare, nimetoka Suguta. Mimi ndo mtaa yenye napiga hustle. Mimi ni artist na nilikuja hapa 2020 January, but so far so good. Nimekuwa nikikaa hii mtaa, nimekuwa already resident, but hustle ni ngumu sana. Hii budget yenye wanasoma kesho, naomba serikali watuangalie tafadhali na watupangie mikakati. At least tunajaribu hata sisi kumove, but venye hustle hainini haitufavor juu kama serikali imepandisha kila kitu. Of course hizi talent zenye tunatumia kwa street kupata pesa ni bure, kwa sababu hakuna mtu atakuletea kazi, na mtu akikuletea kazi hakuna kitu unapata juu. At the end of the day ni chakula tu yenye unaweza kula, unaweza afford.
Sasa pengine kesho ungetaka serikali wasaidie kwa njia gani?
Serikali washukishe kwanza bei ya chakula, sukari, unga. Hiyo at least inaweza kutusaidia juu Wakenya wengi ni maskini. Kama sasa hapa town tunakutananga na kila mtu ametoka kila side ya different sides of Kenya. Na kila mtu ana complain, hakuna mwenye anasema ati Serikali mimi naomba wasaidie especially vijana. Kuna vijana wako na matalanta hapa kwa street, lakini hizo talanta zinaharibika kwa sababu wanapeleka zote kwa drugs.
Wakuo wa nana dolari huona 10. Wewe
Nĩ thengio mũno mwĩroreri nĩ wagĩkorwo ũkĩigua atĩ Akenya mena matanya maingĩ harĩ gũkorwo mũtongoria wa bũrũri mũthenya wa rũciũ akĩmaririkana na njĩra ya gũkorwo akĩmagũithĩria bei ya indo iria makĩria marahũthĩra gũkorwo cigĩthiĩ thĩ nĩguo makorwo magĩteithĩka. Na rĩu ngenda tũnyitanĩre na mwaria wa kerĩ ũrĩa ũgũtwĩra hihi matanya make matariĩ atĩa mũthenya wa rũciũ budget ya bũrũri ĩgĩthomwo.
Thengio, niĩ hambere njĩtagwo Mwangi na ndĩ mũikari wa gũkũ gũndũ gwĩtagwo Nyahururu Laikipia, na itanya rĩa mbere nĩ atĩ thirikari ndĩgũkorwo ĩkĩongerera budget makĩria, tondũ the more budget ĩragĩtarwo mũno rĩ, the more budget mũrigo wa Wanjikũ kũingĩa, tondũ budget ĩrehagwo nĩ Wanjikũ ũkoragwo ũkĩrĩha mbeca icio. So agĩkorwo mekũrehe tririoni ta 5 kana 10 rĩ, no citũ Wanjikũ tũgũka. Na nĩkĩo ũrona maguta nĩ mambatĩrĩte mũno, ũgakora nginyagia cukari nĩ wambatĩrĩte, ona ũrathiĩ ũkona ta ũgĩthiĩ kũracia nginyagia maguta tondũ mao matironeka. Nĩona nĩ ũrathiĩ ũgakora rĩrĩ ta rĩu maguta nĩ tũracokeria thirikari, at least nĩ ĩrarekereirie maguta nĩ makwambia gũsupply, no tũrenda budget ĩgĩũka rĩ ndĩgakorwo ĩrĩ igũrũ mũno, nĩgetha na ithe Wanjikũ rĩ tũtigakorwo tũkĩimbĩrwo nĩ mũrigo mũno wa gũtigĩrĩra atĩ nĩ twa meet budget ĩrĩkũ. Koguo no kĩrĩa ndĩra expect niĩ nĩ rĩrĩ, nĩ budget ona ĩrĩa yathometwo thutha rĩ ndĩkongererwo, ona yũke ĩrĩ o ĩyo kana yũke ĩrĩ thĩ makĩria, nĩgetha tũtigakinyĩrĩkĩre mũno ta Wanjikũ.
Nĩ thengio mũno. Gatho cia mwanya mwiroreri no agikorwo kiigua ati Akenya oho ni maragikorwo makihoya thirikari ati budget ya muthenya wa rucio ndigakorwo iri ya iguru makiria niguo Wanjiku nake ndagagituike ati ni akuhinyiririka ringi ona haria ringi agugikorwo agitwirwo magoti ma iguru ni undu wa kuringana na uria igathomo kana oho thogora wa indo ukorwo kiambatira koguo ni arahoya thirikari ikorwo ikimuririkana niguo gukorwo agithii na mbere na muturire wake na njira ya raithi makiria na ngiribotera Sawa TV tauni-inĩ ya Nyahururu kaunti-inĩ ya Laikipia njitagwo Wacera wa Muchemi.
Urerorera Sawa TV, maundu ni sawa.
Baby nakukunda kunda. Hey, nakupenda. Wasanii ndani ya nyumba. Hey, introducing for the first time. Ndani ya Nike downward. JT. You didn't prevent it, my dear.
Urerorera Sawa TV, maundu ni sawa. Urerorera Sawa TV.
Act of 2012 and the National Assembly Standing Orders 25A and 244C, I will now interrupt business of the House to allow the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury to make a public pronouncement of the budget policy highlights and propose revenue-raising measures for the national government for the financial year 2022-2023 and the medium term. Cabinet Secretary, please proceed to make your pronouncements. You're welcome.
Mr. Speaker, it's once again an immense privilege for me to present to this August House and the people of the Republic of Kenya the budget statement that highlights the budget policies and the revenue-raising measures for the financial year 2022-2023. The presentation of this statement is in fulfillment of the requirements of Section 40 of the Public Finance Management Act and the Standing Order number 241 of the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, our partner states in the East African community have agreed that Kenya can proceed with the early presentation of the budget statement this month. This aligns the budget calendar with the timelines for the general elections scheduled for August 2022. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta took office in 2013. At that time, the country had just completed implementation of the first medium-term plan of the Kenya Vision 2030 and was on the third year of implementation of the 2010 Constitution. During the first 5 years, his administration designed and implemented an economic transformation agenda under the second medium-term plan of Vision 2030. The agenda focused on five key pillars. 1, improving the business climate by maintaining macroeconomic stability, addressing security challenges, and reducing the cost of doing business. 2, closing the infrastructure gaps. 3, promoting investment in key sectors such as manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism. 4, sharing prosperity by investing in poor programs in health, education, and social welfare. And 5, fostering the devolved system of government to enhance service delivery. Building on the progress made under the economic transformation agenda, the government initiated the Big Four agenda anchored on the third medium-term plan or the Vision 2030. The government focused on transforming the lives of Kenyans through strategic interventions on food and nutritional security, affordable housing, manufacturing for job creation, and universal health coverage. Mr. Speaker, while we celebrate the remarkable achievements from the past investments in the priority programs under the economic transformation agenda and the Big Four, the country continues to grapple with various social, economic, and environmental challenges. In preparing this year's budget, we extensively consulted Kenyans. The insights, comments, and suggestions have informed the priorities laid in this budget. Key among the concerns: 1, the high cost of living; 2, high level of unemployment among the youth; 3, income inequality; and 4, public debt burden. Mr. Speaker, we have noted that most of the concerns raised by Kenyans were associated with the negative effects of COVID-19 pandemic. In response, the government developed and implemented appropriate economic policies and rolled out targeted programs that cushion the citizens and businesses from the adverse effects of the pandemic.
Maodo ni sawa.
Baby nakukunda kunda kunda. Ay, nakupenda. Wasanii ndani ya nyumba. Ay, introducing for the first time. Ndani ya Nike downward. You did prevent it, my dear.
Urerorera Sawa TV. Maodo ni sawa.
In the foreign exchange markets. The current account deficit is projected at 5.9% of GDP in 2022, supported by a rebound in horticulture and tea exports, as well as increased inflows of remittances. Mr. Speaker, the economic outlook may be affected by emerging domestic and external risks. On the domestic front, reemergence of COVID-19 variant and possible adverse weather conditions could reverse the projected economic recovery. On the external front, the ongoing conflict in Eastern Europe has created uncertainties that will affect the global economic outlook through disruptions of supply chains, rising global oil prices, and increased inflationary pressures. Mr. Speaker, the government will monitor all the domestic and external risks and take appropriate policy actions to cushion the economy and Kenyans in the event the risk materializes. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, the government has progressively implemented policies and programs under the Big Four agenda to foster socio-economic development. However, the COVID-19 pandemic slowed down the implementation and full realization of the expected benefits. Mr. Speaker, to further accelerate economic recovery and improve livelihoods, the government will continue to implement and expand the economic recovery program in this budget. The program is hinged on a sound macroeconomic policy framework that aims to, 1, enhance security for our citizens and their properties while fostering a secure and conducive business environment. 2, scale up development of critical infrastructure in roads, rail, energy, and water sectors. These will ease movements of people and goods, reduce the cost of doing business, enhance access to social amenities, and promote Kenya's competitiveness. 3, enhance transformation of key economic sectors for broad-based sustainable recovery by promoting agricultural productivity, growth in manufacturing, environmental conservation and water supply, support tourism recovery, and ensure sustainable land use and management. 4, expand access to quality services in health, education, and appropriate social safety nets for the vulnerable population. 5, support the youth, women, and persons living with disabilities through government-funded empowerment program. 6, continue supporting the evolved system of government through active engagements, policy guidance, and timely transfers of shareable revenues. These will indeed strengthen county government systems and enhance quality service delivery. And lastly, sustain implementation of various reforms targeted at enhancing efficiency in the delivery of public services. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the economic recovery program that's also supported by the International Monetary Fund is fully on track. The IMF program has 4 key objectives. First, scaling up the COVID-19 response by supporting health and other sectors most impacted by the pandemic. Second, reducing debt vulnerabilities by pursuing a revenue-driven fiscal consolidation plan that targets to stabilize debt to GDP ratio and subsequently put it on a downward level. Third, supporting the structural and governance reforms while addressing weaknesses in state-owned enterprises with a view to enhancing efficiency in the management of economic and fiscal affairs. And fourth, implementing specific measures to strengthen the monetary policy framework and support financial stability. Mr. Speaker, alongside the aforementioned, the government has continued with the implementation of various stimulus programs to manage COVID-19 pandemic, support businesses, and general employment in order to minimize the adverse socio-economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, in the financial year 2021-2022, the third phase of the economic stimulus program and the implementation targeted, 1, the Kazi Mtaani program to create employment for over 200,000 youths across the country. 2, preparation of the education sector for the transition in the competency-based curriculum by considering new classrooms to accommodate more than 1 million people expected to join junior secondary schools in January 2023. 3, construction of additional 50 new level 3 hospitals in uncovered and densely populated areas across the country to enhance access to medical services. 4, supporting livelihoods of farmers within the sugar belt, provision of fertilizer subsidy to small-scale tea farmers, and completion of the ongoing intervention in the COVID subsector. And 5, supporting communities affected by drought in arid and semi-arid regions of the country. Mr. Speaker, in this statement, I'll be proposing additional allocation to various activities under the Economic Stimulus Program to further support livelihoods and stimulate economic activities. Mr. Speaker, in this budget, the government will strive to enhance the role of the private sector in the economy, including financing infrastructure projects through the public-private partnership, support micro, small, and medium enterprises by facilitating access to finance, invest in ICT and digital infrastructure to support the use of digital platforms to facilitate e-commerce and efficient delivery of public services, promote and strengthen local and foreign resource mobilization efforts to sustain funding of the identified development projects and programs, improve social protection through targeted policy interventions and programs, to promote local production processes and domestic supply value chains, and lastly, strengthen the monitoring and evaluation system for quality outcomes of the projects. Mr. Speaker, implementation of the socio-economic policies and structural reforms have seen Kenya graduate from a low-income to a middle-income country with an estimated per capita income of Kenyan shilling 244,000 in 2021. This is a significant leap of 92.1% from the level of Kenyan shilling 127,000 in 2013. Our vision is to achieve the upper middle-income status by 2030 with a minimum per capita income of at least Kenyan shilling 453,000. Mr. Speaker, looking back since 2013, when the current government took reign of power, Kenya has achieved monumental milestones, especially at the macroeconomic level. For instance, the economy has grown by 155% from the value of Kenya shilling 5.3 trillion in 2013 to Kenya shilling 13.5 trillion in 2022. Two, a strong economic growth, averaging 4.6%, has been realized over the period, including impressive recovery of 7.6% in 2021 from a contraction of 0.3% in 2020, occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. Third, cumulatively 5.1 million new jobs in both formal and informal sectors were created. Fourthly, the economy has maintained macroeconomic stability with inflation rate within target and interest rates remaining stable. The average annual inflation rate declined from 7.2% in 2013 to 5.7% in 2021. Fifthly, the commercial bank lending to the private sector doubled from Kenyan shilling 1.5 trillion to Kenyan shilling 3.1 trillion in 2021. Sixth, successfully lengthened the average time to maturity for treasury bonds from 7.4 years in June 2013 to 9 years in March 2022. This has improved the maturity profile of domestic debt and supported refinancing risk mitigation. Seventh, the foreign exchange market has remained stable, with the official foreign exchange reserves increasing from US $6.5 billion or 4.4 months of import cover to US $9.5 billion or 5.6 months of import cover in 2021. The current account deficit improved by dropping from 7.7% of GDP in 2013 to 4.9% of GDP in 2021, effectively supporting the stability of the foreign exchange market. Annual diaspora remittance grew by close to 300% from Kenya shilling 112 billion in 2013 to the current Kenya shilling 436 billion in 2022. Foreign direct investment rose from Kenya shilling 56.7 trillion in 2013 to Kenya shilling 75.1 trillion in 2027. Ordinary revenue collection has more than doubled from Kenya shilling 0.8 trillion in the financial year 2012-2013 to Kenya shilling 1.8 trillion in the financial year 2020-21, and further to Kenya shilling 2 trillion in the financial year 2021-2022. The poverty prevalence rate declined from 36.1% in 2013 to 33.6% in 2019. Mr. Speaker, the ongoing police reforms aimed at protecting lives and enhancing general security of the citizens have significantly improved the ratio of police to citizen, from 1 policeman to 1,000 citizens in 2012 to the current 1 policeman to 462 citizens. With regard to the infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, the government has constructed an additional 10,500 kilometers of tarmac roads spread across the 47 counties, facilitating efficient movement of people and goods, thereby rapidly stimulating economic activities. Mr. Speaker, The completion of the standard gauge railway has not only eased movement of passengers during the period, but also led to the transportation of 17.6 million tons of cargo between 2018 and 2021. During this period, over 6.5 million passengers have used the standard gauge railway. This has had positive effects on the economy, including creation of jobs. Mr. Speaker, within the same period, the government tripled power generation from 1,300 megawatts to the current 3,900 megawatts. Of these, 73% is from green source, thus consolidating Kenya's leading generation of green energy in Africa. This has significantly increased the number of households connected to electricity to more than 8.3 million today, compared to 2.3 million in 2013. Mr. Speaker, the international oil prices have been rapidly rising for close to a year without any sign of easing. Conscious of the adverse impact of the high oil prices on all sectors of the economy, the government has taken deliberate steps to subsidize palm prices through the Petroleum Development Levy Fund. This action has stabilized palm prices and consequently prices of goods and services. The government remains committed to provide adequate resources to mitigate the rising cost of fuel. Mr. Speaker, in its pursuit to increase productivity while staying on the economic transformation trajectory, the government has sustained the pace of investment in all sectors. The agricultural sector remains the largest contributor to our GDP and priority under the Big Four agenda on food and nutrition security. The government has continued to support large-scale production of staple food, expanded irrigation schemes, increased access to agricultural inputs, and supported smallholder farmers to sustainably produce and market various commodities. In addition, the government introduced the warehouse receipt system to reduce post-harvest losses. Mr. Speaker, the price of fertilizer has more than doubled in the last 1 year and is still rising. To safeguard food security in the country, the government has allocated Kenya shilling 3 billion to subsidize farmers during the current planting season. We propose to allocate a further Kenya shilling 2.7 billion in the financial 2022-2023 to cushion the farmers while sustaining food production. Mr. Speaker, to strengthen land and property ownership, the government has issued over 5.3 million title deeds over the last 8 years. The government has also fully digitized land records in Nairobi Registry under the National Land Information Management System, referred to Ardhi Sasa program, to improve accessibility of land records and lowering the cost of land transaction. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's emergent oceans and blue economy will remain a key growth engine for the country. In the last 5 years, the country has heavily invested in measures to expand marine fisheries, grow marine transport and logistics, and establishing Kenya as a source of quality and cost-effective labor. These measures have resulted in the opening of the Lamu port, reopening of the port of Kisumu, establishment of the nascent shipyards at the port of Mombasa and Kisumu, revival of the Kenya National Shipping Line, construction of an ultra-modern tuna fish hub at Liwatoni in Mombasa, among others. Mr. Speaker, with the proposed interventions, the sector is on course to be among the top 5 key contributors to the Kenyan economy and a game-changing enhancement of the socio-economic fortune of the Kenyans living next to our marine resources. Mr. Speaker, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the government strategy to revive tourism sector has yielded positive results. The earnings from the sector had increased by 74% from Kenya shilling 94 billion in 2013 to Kenya shilling 163.6 billion in 2019. Tourist arrivals had also increased from 1.5 million to 2 million during the same period. In 2020, these numbers significantly declined due to the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, in the health sector, hospital bed capacity increased from 56,069 in 2013 to 82,291 in 2020. This increase attributed to over 1,912 new hospitals constructed across the country by the National County Government. Further, the introduction of free maternal health care program, dubbed Linda Mama, initiated in 2016, has led to the decline of maternal mortality rate by 26%. This program, alongside the Beyond Zero campaign, led by the First Lady, has significantly contributed to the improvement of maternal health care in the country. Mr. Speaker, to address the growing cancer burden over the last decade, the government has formulated appropriate policies and allocated sufficient resources to guide the delivery of cancer testing and treatment services. Some of these interventions include: 1. Establishment of the National Cancer Institute as an overall coordinating agency; 2. Construction and equipment of comprehensive cancer centers at Kenyatta National Hospital in Mombasa, Nakuru, and Garissa counties; and 3. Support to 10 county referral hospitals to operationalize chemotherapy clinics. Mr. Speaker, to address the quality of education in the country, the government has rolled out radical reforms in the sector that have significantly improved the quality of education in the country. For instance, the investment in the sector has seen the number of primary schools increase from 26,549 to 32,437, and secondary schools from 7,174 to 10,413 between 2012 and 2020. The number of technical and vocational education training institutions also increased from 701 to 2,301 during the same period. As a measure of unprecedented success, transition rate from the primary secondary schools moved from 64.5% in 2012 to the current 100%. In addition, under the radical competence-based curriculum, the plan for the first group to join junior secondary schools in January 2013 is well on course. Mr. Speaker, following the sustained investment in human capital development, Kenya was impressively ranked position 3 in sub-Saharan African region with a human capital index of 0.55 in the year 2020. Mr. Speaker, from 2013 to 2021, the government disbursed Kenya shilling 151.6 billion through the Inua Jamii program support over 1.2 million vulnerable persons, among them orphans, the elderly, and persons living with severe disabilities. Further, the government disbursed Kenya shilling 6.95 billion to support women, youth, and persons with disabilities enterprises through 74,021 groups under the Ways of Fund. Mr. Speaker, to improve efficiency in the delivery of government services, the government initiated and operationalized 52 Huduma centers across the country. In 2014, the government launched the e-Citizen platform, where 350 government services have now been successfully migrated. The platform has since served over 27.2 million customers while raising Kenya shilling 87.1 billion in revenue for the government. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, the government successfully rolled out implementation of the 2010 Constitution. The 47 county government, independent commissions, and other institutions established by the Constitution were duly operationalized, albeit with huge financial requirements, thereby straining the country's fiscal position. Mr. Speaker, to build on the milestones achieved so far, we'll be implementing the following policy, legal, and institutional reforms to improve the business environment, increase efficiency in public service delivery, and strengthen transparency and accountability in public finance management. Mr. Speaker, the government has continued to implement various reforms in procurement to improve efficiency and transparency, enhance good governance, and promote savings in the procurement process. Among the reforms is the procurement of an end-to-end e-government procurement system, whose pilot phase will commence in July 2022, with a target date for full rollout to all ministries, departments, and agencies in January 2023. Mr. Speaker, on framework contracting, we have submitted to this House for enactment the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Bill 2021. This bill provides for multiple awards where several bidders can be awarded the same contract. Once enacted, it will hasten the delivery of services to citizenry and support local farms, particularly in specialized areas like pharmaceuticals, supply of foodstuffs, and commodity markets. Mr. Speaker, further, we have put together a framework that harmonizes the qualification for supply chain management personnel, that clarifies competencies for the various cadres in the supply chain management function. In this respect, I direct all procuring entities to adhere to the requirement of this framework. Mr. Speaker, the government commitment to empowering SMEs owned by women, youth, and persons with disabilities to other state-owned enterprises to be able to anticipate, quantify, monitor, manage, and mitigate fiscal risk from the state corporations. Mr. Speaker, Kenya Airways plays a major and catalytic role in the economic development of this country. The airline is facing severe cash flow constraints following the global lockdowns triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. The government, as a major shareholder, supporting the restructuring of Kenya Airways to adapt to the challenges facing the aviation industry due to the adverse impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Kenya Airways will be required to trim its network, rationalize frequencies of flights, operate a smaller fleet, and rationalize its staff complement. I'll be proposing a budget allocation to meet the restructuring costs. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to support Kenya Power and Lighting Company to increase its efficiency while sustaining systematic reduction in tariff to electricity users. The recent 15% tariff reduction by the government has not only brought immediate relief to the consumers, but also led to the realization of broad benefits, including reductions of prices of goods by manufacturers. Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan banking sector is stable and has shown great resilience with strong capital and liquidity buffers built on reforms initiated by the Central Bank of Kenya. A clear demonstration of resilience and recovery of the banking sector from the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic was strong capital adequacy and liquidity ratios. As at the end of December 2021, capital adequacy ratio was 19.6%, which was above the minimum requirement of 14.5%, while liquidity ratio was 56.2%, which is also above the 20% requirement. The sector has continued with its transformation journey under the Kenya Banking Sector Charter issued in 2019 by the Central Bank of Kenya. The charter focuses on strengthening risk-based credit pricing, entrenching customer centricity in the operations, and ensuring ethical culture in the banks. In addition, the Central Bank of Kenya Act 2021 was enacted to provide the Central Bank with powers to license and oversight the previously unregulated digital credit providers. Mr. Speaker, commercial banks face climate-related risk in their operations. In this regard, the CBK issued a detailed guidelines on climate-related risk management to all commercial banks in October 2021. The banks are now required to integrate climate-related risk into the overall risk management framework. Mr. Speaker, the FIN Access Survey 2021 conducted in the 47 counties revealed that access to formal financial services improved from 82.9% in 2019 to 83.7% in 2021. The increase of 0.8% access through the formal channels was attributed to the progress made by Kenya to expand financial access through various channels, including mobile money financial platforms. Access through the informal channels, on the other hand, reduced from 6.1% to 4.7%, while the excluded population increased slightly from 11% to 11.6% during the same period. Mr. Speaker, over the last 15 years, an elaborate financial service ecosystem in Kenya has evolved from an initial basic money transfer innovation. In this period, access to financial services has increased from 26% of adults in 2006 to the current 83%. Further, the government has rolled out mobile money, strengthened real-time gross settlement system, and established a regional payment system at both the East African Community and COMESA region. In order to strengthen the national payment system, Mr. Speaker, the Central Bank of Kenya in February 2022 launched the National Payment Strategy 2022-2025, which seeks to realize a faster, secure, efficient, and collaborative payment system that supports financial inclusion and innovation, while reinforcing the emergence of 24-hour economy. Mr. Speaker, in order to attract increased financing and investment in Kenya, the Nairobi International Financial System Authority has put in place the required operating framework and regulations. With the necessary framework now in place and the official opening slated later in the year, NIFCA will be expected to be a key catalyst in supporting the economic growth. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company continues to play a leading role in the delivery of affordable housing in Kenya. I am pleased to note that since September 2020, KMRC has disbursed over $2 billion to 7 primary mortgage lenders, and is currently processing an additional 7 billion. To provide a sustainable source of funding and to complement the existing credit lines, the company whose bond was recently listed at the Nairobi Security Exchange successfully issued its first corporate bond of Kenya shilling 1.4 billion under the medium-term note program of Kenya shilling 10.5 billion. Mr. Speaker, since the launch of the Credit Guarantee Scheme in December 2020, total loans extended to micro, small, and medium enterprises under this scheme had surpassed Kenya shilling 2.2 billion by December 2021. This has expanded access to affordable credit to micro, small, and medium enterprises to 45 counties across 11 different sectors of the economy. To enhance coverage of the scheme, additional participating financial intermediaries will be brought on board. Further, the government will seek support of development partners to increase the scheme's capital from the current Kenya shilling 4 billion to Kenya shilling 10 billion over the medium term. Mr. Speaker, to deepen capital markets, the government is undertaking a review of the legal and regulatory framework to address emerging issues in the capital market space. These include, among others, aspects on collective investment schemes and investment-based crowdfunding. In addition, the government is installing a new central security depository system at the Central Bank of Kenya to support planned reforms in the secondary trading of government bonds. Mr. Speaker, to enable more investment advisors offer investment advisory services, I propose to amend the Capital Markets Act to expand the spectrum of persons who can act as investment advisors. This will allow single director companies and partnerships to be licensed as investment advisors. Mr. Speaker, the payroll of the public service pension continues to grow and had more than 300,000 pensioners and dependents as of December 2021. The National Treasury will roll out the much-awaited re-engineered pension management system in the course of the financial year. The system will offer an end-to-end enterprise resource planning solution in the management and processing of pension benefits. Mr. Speaker, the Public Service Superannuation Scheme that was operationalized in January 2021 has attracted more than 352,000 members with a current fund value of shilling 27 billion. The scheme is eventually expected to ease pressure on the pension wage bill while guaranteeing sustainability of public service pension. Mr. Speaker, to further improve the pension policy framework, the National Treasury is developing an overarching national pension policy that sets the guiding principles for application across board on structuring and management of retirement benefits for public servants. In order to widen the scope of investment, where pension schemes can invest their funds, Mr. Speaker, I propose to amend the retirement benefits investment guidelines to include the unlisted real estate investment trusts incorporated in Kenya that are approved by the Capital Markets Authority. Mr. Speaker, the much-awaited government-backed pension scheme for informal sector workers, Kenya National Entrepreneur Saving Trust, KENEST, targeting 15 million marginalized informal sector workers, has now been registered. To operationalize the scheme, the government is restructuring the M-Akiba bond platform for safe and secure investment for the unique, heterogeneous informal workers. To this effect, the National Treasury is working with stakeholders in the financial sector to roll out the scheme across the 47 counties in the course of this financial year. Mr. Speaker, in the recent times, motorcycles and three-wheelers have increasingly been engaged in commercial fare-paying passengers business. Unfortunately, the number of accidents in this category of business have been on a steady rise, yet the owners of motorcycles do not have insurance cover to cater for any treatment in case of injuries or compensation in case of death or any other damages caused by an accident involving motorcycles. In this respect, I propose to amend the insurance regulations to require motorcycles and three-wheelers used by fare-paying passengers to take insurance for their passengers. Mr. Speaker, in an effort to strengthen disaster risk management in the country, the government will fast-track the enactment of the disaster risk management policy and bill, finalize the disaster risk management strategy, and update the disaster risk financing strategy. In addition, the National Treasury will expedite the finalization of Public Finance Management Regulation 2022. Mr. Speaker, In order to demonstrate our commitment in addressing climate change, the government will implement the Financing Locally Led Climate Action Program, a 10-year financing program aimed at mobilizing climate finances to support local communities build their resilience and adapt to the impacts of climate change in 47 counties. In the financial year 2022-2023, I propose to allocate Kenya shilling 6.1 billion to this program. Mr. Speaker, in addition, the government has finalized the long-term low-emission strategy to guide a low-carbon, climate-resilient development path. To address the financing challenge of climate change actions, the government will develop a climate finance mobilization strategy. Further, in order to promote private sector investments in green projects and programs, the government will fast-track the finalization of the national policy framework on green fiscal incentives and development of the carbon mechanism design. In the forestry sector, the government is committed to expand the country's tree cover from the current 7.2% to the 10% target. The government is revitalizing efforts to meet this important target through resource mobilization with partners and engagement with counties to dedicate more areas and resources under the forestry regimes, as well as tackling the catchment degradation that has contributed to the rising lakes phenomenon. In this regard, I propose to allocate Kenya shilling 10.2 billion to support conservation of forests and water towers. Mr. Speaker, in order to encourage reporting and recovery of identified assets by the Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority, I propose to amend the Unclaimed Finance Assets Act to provide for waiver of penalties, fines, and audit fees in justifiable circumstances, as well as to cap accumulation of penalties and interest to the value of the assets. I also propose a 12-month voluntary disclosure program to grant relief or penalties on the unclaimed financial assets declared and delivered in the next 12 months under the program. Mr. Speaker, Article 173 of our Constitution established a judiciary fund, which will be administered by the Chief Registrar in meeting the administrative expenses of the judiciary. In this respect, the necessary procedures for operationalization of the fund have been put in place. In particular, the following have so far been achieved. 1, the Judiciary Fund Act and regulations have been enacted. 2, the bank accounts for the fund have been opened at the Central Bank of Kenya. 3, an appropriate budget for judiciary in the financial year 2022-2023 has been created. And 4, if means has been enhanced to accommodate judiciary fund operation. This fund will be fully operational with effect from 1st July 2022. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal policy supporting the budget for the financial year 2022-23 and also the medium term is designed to accelerate economic recovery for improved livelihood for Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, as mentioned earlier, one of the objectives of our economic recovery program is to reduce the debt vulnerabilities by pursuing a revenue-driven fiscal consolidation. In this regard, the government has developed a draft national tax policy to guide tax administration that will soon be shared with stakeholders and peer review institutions for input. Further, the government is developing a medium-term revenue strategy to boost tax revenues, improve the tax system, and link taxation to our development needs over the medium term. Mr. Speaker, in addition, the government will continue to rationalize tax expenditures and retain those whose intention is to promote investment and ensure sustainability and value for money from our resources. In the tax expenditure report 2021, we noted a significant decline in the level of tax expenditure from 5.17% of GDP in 2017 to 2.96% as a percentage of GDP in 2020. We shall continue to review the existing tax expenditure in order to boost the tax revenue. Mr. Speaker, we project total revenue collection, including appropriation in aid and grants for the financial year 2022-2023 budget, to be Kenya shilling 2.4 trillion, equivalent to 17.5% of GDP. Of these, ordinary revenue is projected at Kenya shilling 2.14 trillion, equivalent to 15.3% of GDP. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, total expenditure in the financial year 2022-2023 is projected at Kenya shilling 3.3 trillion, equivalent to 23.9% of GDP. Recurrent expenditure will amount to Kenya shilling 2.2 trillion, while development expenditure, including allocation to foreign finance projects, contingency fund, and conditional transfers to county government, is Kenya shilling 715.5 billion. The funding is expected to accelerate completion of ongoing infrastructure projects. The equitable share to counties is projected at Kenya shilling 370 billion. Mr. Speaker, given the projected revenues and grants against the projected expenditure, the fiscal deficit is projected to decline to Kenya shilling 862.5 billion, equivalent to 6.2% of GDP in the financial year 2022-23, from Kenya shilling 1,024 billion, equivalent to 8.1% of GDP in the financial year 2021-2022. The fiscal deficit will be financed through net external financing of Kenya shilling 280 billion, equivalent to 2% of GDP, and net domestic financing of Kenya shilling 581 billion, equivalent to 4.2% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, our medium-term fiscal consolidation policy targets to progressively reduce the level of fiscal deficit from Kenya shilling 862 billion, equivalent 6.2% of GDP in the financial year 2022-23, to Kenya shilling 634.1 billion, equivalent 3.2% of GDP in the financial year 2025-26. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has implemented reforms in public debt management to strengthen debt transparency and accountability. The depth of coverage and disclosures on public debt information has been enhanced in line with the best practices. A broad range of information on public debt is readily available to the general public on the National Treasury website, while an investor relations unit within the Public Debt Management Office facilitates investor, lender, and public engagements on public debt issues. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's debt carrying capacity is rated moderate, and the overall public debt is sustainable. We have initiated implementation of a set of measures to lower cost and risk in the public debt portfolio. These measures include cancellation of some non-disbursing external loans, rearrangements of syndicated external loans, and increasing the issuance of treasury bonds to lengthen the maturity structure and improve debt sustainability indicators. The preferred debt financing are highly concessional loans offered at below market interest rates with long repayment period. Recourse to commercial borrowing has been maintained at minimum levels. Mr. Speaker, the current legal numerical public debt ceiling has constrained public funding of projects, while at the same time failing to consider the effects of external shocks on the economy. In this regard, we propose to replace the debt ceiling with a debt anchor and set it at 55% of debt to GDP in present value terms. This is in line with internationally accepted conventional practice. Further, we provided a requirement that the Cabinet Secretary National Treasury reports to Parliament whenever the debt level swings beyond the threshold with time-bound remedial actions. This approach ensures that debt remains within sustainable levels and entrenches accountability and transparency in public debt management. I have forwarded to this August House the necessary changes to the PFM marks to align ourselves with this desired position and request that the House consider it favorably. Mr. Speaker, the Public-Private Partnership Program has gained traction, and under the new PPP Act 2021 that has reduced the number of approval processes, introduced timelines, and strengthened the institutional framework by elevating the PPP unit to a directorate in the National Treasury. So far, the government has achieved closure on a number of projects, of which a key one seeks to deliver over 4,000 housing units to frontline Kenya Defence Force personnel. Mr. Speaker, to ensure projects with the highest socioeconomic returns are selected and implemented, we are putting in place a joint public investment management and public-private partnership planning framework and strengthening the coordination between the Public Debt Management Office and the Public-Private Partnership Directorate for effective control of fiscal exposure, as envisioned the new PPP Act 2021. Further, the government will fully operationalize the Public-Private Partnership Project Facilitation Fund to support activities of the PPP Directorate and those of the contracting authorities in preparation phase of a project during the tendering process and project appraisal. Mr. Speaker, in view of the limited fiscal space, the government will embark on rationalizing the existing portfolio of projects being implemented by the national government and issue regulations for managing public investment. The government has developed the Public Investment Management Information System, which is expected to be a repository of all projects implemented by the national and county governments. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the highlights of the government's spending priorities in the coming financial year. In light of the revenue challenges and significant expenditure demands, spending in the financial 2022-2023 will focus on supporting economic recovery and the Big Four agenda to ensure the highest impact on the well-being of Kenyans. The proposed total program spending for the financial year 2022-2023 amounts to Kenya shilling 3.3 trillion. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, the government is implementing the third economic stimulus program of Kenya shilling 30.1 billion to accelerate the pace of economic growth and sustain the gains realized so far. To further enhance the ongoing interventions, I propose a total of Kenya shilling 20.6 billion in this budget support implementation of various activities. Mr. Speaker, out of this, Kenya shilling 2.1 billion is for the youth empowerment and employment creation under the Kazi Mtaani program, Kenya shilling 8.2 billion for improving educational outcomes, Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for improving health outcomes, Kenya shilling 5.8 billion for improving environment, water and sanitation facilities, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for fertilizer subsidy, and Kenya shilling 1.6 billion for enhancing liquidity to business. Mr. Speaker, to support implementation of the projects and programs under the Big Four agenda, I have proposed a total of Kenya shilling 146.8 billion. Mr. Speaker, we have continued to strengthen our healthcare systems in our quest for universal health coverage. Better health outcomes depend on the availability, accessibility, and capacity of health workers to deliver quality services anchored on well-equipped and provisioned healthcare facilities. Towards this end, the government has implemented various initiatives laying ground for achieving the goal of 100% health insurance coverage. Key among these initiatives include the free maternity program dubbed Linda Mama, which currently benefits over 1 million mothers annually, increasing the total number of health workers in the public and private sector, investment in the health infrastructure, and development of a digital health platform to support effective monitoring of the health sector. In addition, the government enacted the NHIF Amendment Act, which provides for the establishment of a centralized healthcare provider management system to ensure efficient management and payment of claims, as well as data collection. Mr. Speaker, to further enhance realization of the universal health coverage, I propose to allocate Kenya shilling 146.8 billion to the healthcare sector to support the various programs aimed at improving healthcare outcomes. Of this amount, Kenya shilling 62.3 billion will fund activities and programs for the attainment to universal health coverage. Specific allocation for various activities and programs include Kenya shilling 7 billion for purchase of COVID vaccines and related expenditure, Kenya shilling 4.1 billion for free maternity health care, Kenya shilling 5.2 billion for the managed equipment services, as well as Kenya shilling 1.8 billion to provide medical cover for the elderly and severely disabled persons in our society. Mr. Speaker, to lower cases of HIV/AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis in the country, Kenya shilling 16.2 billion has been recommended for the purpose. To enhance vaccines and immunization program, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 5.2 billion. Mr. Speaker, to further improve health service delivery, Kenya shilling 18.1 billion has been proposed for the Kenyatta National Hospital, Kenya shilling 11.7 billion for the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, Kenya shilling 7.7 billion for the Kenya Medical Training Center, Kenya shilling 2.9 billion for the Kenya Medical Research Institute, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for the construction of Kenya National Hospital Burns and Pediatric Center, Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for for procurement of family planning and reproductive health care communities. Kenya shilling 300 million for procurement of cyberknife radiotherapy equipment. Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for the construction of cancer center at Kisii Level 5 Hospital, and Kenya shilling 619 million for the procurement of equipment at the National Blood Transfusion Services. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, the government embarked on a plan to provide decent and affordable houses for Kenyans. This was envisaged to create additional jobs, provide market for manufacturers as well as suppliers, and raise the contribution of real estate and construction sector to GDP. To achieve this, government has been implementing policy and administrative reforms targeted at lowering the cost of construction and improving access to finance for affordable housing. The government has also mobilized resources to support construction of affordable housing units and social housing units. Building on the gains and to ensure success of this initiative, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 27.7 billion for the affordable housing program. The proposed allocation includes Kenya shilling 4.6 billion to Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company for enhancement of the company's capital, as well as for on lending to primary mortgage lenders, Kenya shilling 8.7 billion for construction of affordable housing units, as well as Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for construction of social housing units. Mr. Speaker, to support the Nairobi Metropolitan Services in reversing urban indignity in Nairobi County, Kenya shilling 200 million has been recommended for the Nairobi Metropolitan Services Improvement Project, and Kenya shilling 118.7 million for construction of footbridges. Other key allocations to the housing, urban development, and public works sector include Kenya shilling 5.9 billion for the Kenya Informal Settlement Development Project 2, Kenya shilling 700 million for construction of markets, Kenya shilling 1 billion for maintenance of government pool houses, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for the construction of housing unit for the National Police and Kenya Prison, Kenya shilling 700 million for the Kenya Urban Program. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 1.2 billion to support the Nairobi Bus Rapid Transport Project to offer an efficient and time-saving public transport. Mr. Speaker, implementation of the appropriate policies coupled with enhanced investments in the manufacturing sector has created a conducive business environment to support and protect local industries, generation of jobs, and improve livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, to further promote local industries, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 10.1 billion under the various implementing ministries, departments, and agencies. Out of these, Kenya shilling 1 billion will go to the credit guarantee scheme to enhance access to affordable credit by micro, small, and medium enterprises in the manufacturing sector. And Kenya shilling 626 million for provision of finances to micro, small, and medium enterprises through the Kenya Industrial Estate. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed Kenya shilling 2.6 billion for the Dongokundu Special Economic Zone, Kenya shilling 295 million for the development of the Special Economic Zone, Textile Park in Naivasha, Kenani Leather Industry Park, and at the River Textile Hub, Kenya shilling 50 million for the Freeport and Industrial Park Special Economic Zone in Mombasa. Other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 410.4 million for the modernization of Rivertex, and Kenya shilling 3 billion for supporting access to finance and enterprise recovery. Mr. Speaker, in order to maximize the benefits from our cash crop, the government will make further investment towards the revival and enhancement of output. In this respect, Mr. Speaker, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 212.1 million for modernization of cooperative cotton ginneries, and a further Kenya shilling 250 million for cotton industry revitalization. Mr. Speaker, to equip our youth with essential training and internship opportunities, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for the Kenya Industrial and Entrepreneurship Project, Kenya shilling 2.1 billion for the Kenya Youth Employment and Opportunities Project, Kenya shilling 500 million for industrial research laboratories, Kenya shilling 200 million for constituency industrial development centers. Mr. Speaker, as part of the Big Four agenda, the government is implementing measures and interventions to achieve food and nutrition security for all Kenyans. These measures include supporting large-scale production of staple food, expanding irrigation schemes, increasing access to agricultural inputs, and supporting smallholder farmers to sustainably produce and market various commodities. To further support programs under this pillar, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 46.7 billion in this budget. Out of this, Kenya shilling 4.2 billion will go to the National Agricultural and Rural Inclusivity Project, Kenya shilling 1.7 billion for the Kenya Soil Enhancement Program, Kenya shilling 1.9 billion has been proposed for the Emergency Locust Response, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for the National Value Chain Support Program, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for the Agricultural Sector Development Support Program 2, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for the Small Scale Irrigation and Value Addition Project, and Kenya shilling 690 million for Food Security and Crop Diversification Project. Mr. Speaker, the government will further set aside Kenya shilling 2.7 billion for fertilizer subsidy to cushion farmers during the short range from October to December 2022. This is in addition to the Kenya shilling 3 billion allocated in the financial 2021-2022. Mr. Speaker, to improve livestock production, I propose Kenya shilling 500 million for free disease holding ground in Lamu. I also propose Kenya shilling 1.7 billion for the Kenya Livestock Commercialization Program and Kenya shilling 121 million for livestock production under Big Four initiative. Mr. Speaker, to promote sustainable utilization of the blue economy resources, I have proposed an allocation of 1.9 billion for the Aquaculture Business Development Project, Kenya shilling 2.8 billion for Kenya Marine Fisheries and Socioeconomic Development Project, Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for exploitation of living resources under the blue economy, Kenya shilling 1 billion for construction of fish processing plant in Lamu, Kenya shilling 270 million for coastal fisheries infrastructure development, Kenya shilling 210 million for rehabilitation of fish landing sites in Lake Victoria, Kenya shilling 204 million for aquaculture technology development and innovation transfers, and Kenya shilling 126.3 million for the development of the Blue Economy Initiative. Mr. Speaker, in order to increase agricultural production and enhance resilience to climate change risk in targeted smallholder farming and pastoral communities in Kenya, I have set aside Kenya shilling 147 million for the Climate Smart Agricultural Productivity Project, Kenya shilling 850 million to enhance drought resilience and sustainable livelihood, Kenya shilling 178 million towards ending drought emergencies in Kenya, and in addition, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 421 million for the livestock and crop insurance scheme to reduce the vulnerabilities of Kenyan farmers to diseases and natural disasters. Mr. Speaker, to ensure legitimacy of land ownership, I have recommended Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for processing and registration of title deeds, Kenya shilling 769 million for digitization of land registries, and Kenya shilling 130 million for construction of land registries. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 90 million for revitalization of cotton industry, Kenya shilling 300 million for mitigation of fall armyworms, Kenya shilling 200 million for establishment of liquid nitrogen plant, Kenya shilling 200 million towards the embryo transfer project, and Kenya shilling 250 million for construction and refurbishment of the Leather Science Institute. Mr. Speaker, having highlighted expenditures under the Economic Stimulus Program and the Big Four agenda initiatives, I now turn to other proposed areas of expenditure in this budget that will support our path to sustainable and resilient economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to expand critical infrastructure in roads, rails, air, and seaports to create an enabling environment for economic recovery and employment creation. Towards this, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 212.5 billion to support construction of roads and bridges, as well as their rehabilitation and maintenance. Mr. Speaker, the standard gauge railway has presented a modern and efficient transport system that is safe, comfortable, and affordable for passengers and freights. To expand railway transport to the rest of the country, I have proposed Kenya shilling 18.5 billion for development of the standard gauge railway, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for railways metro lines, Kenya shilling 439 million for rehabilitation of locomotive, and Kenya shilling 264 million for development of ERP system for SGR. Mr. Speaker, to support production of reliable and affordable energy, I propose a total of shilling 91.5 billion, excluding the provision set aside under the B4 agenda initiative. Out of this, shilling 62.9 billion will cater for transmission and distribution of power. Shilling 18.5 billion for development of geothermal energy. Shilling 9.3 billion for electrification of public facilities, and shilling 2 billion for development of nuclear energy, as well as exploration and mining of coal. Mr. Speaker, the security of our nation remains paramount and must be maintained to safeguard the considerable development gains. For this reason, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 317.8 billion to support operations of the National Police Service, Defense, and the National Intelligence Services. Mr. Speaker, the proposed allocations include shilling 128.4 billion for defense, shilling 46.4 billion for the National Intelligence Service, and shilling 122.2 billion for police and prison service, shilling 10.7 billion for leasing of police motor vehicles, and shilling 1 billion for police modernization program, shilling 1 billion for the National Communication and Surveillance System, and shilling 335 million for the equipment of the National Forensic Laboratory. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include shilling 4.8 billion for medical insurance for the National Police Service and prisons, shilling 2.3 billion for the group personal insurance for the National Police Service and prisons, as well as shilling 1 billion for the National Integrated Identity Management System.